I'm Charisse LeClaire. The September 9th primary is right around the corner, and we want you to be informed. CBS 3 Springfield, the Republican, MassLive.com, and New England Public Radio have joined together to bring you a detailed look at the candidates running for public office. Now here's the Republicans' Robert-rizzuto to introduce us to candidates running for office here in Western Massachusetts.
Hello and thanks for joining us for this edition of the 2014 Campaign Roundtable Series. I'm politics reporter Robert-rizzuto, and before we meet the candidates today, I'd like to introduce you to our panel of journalists. We have from the Republicans editorial team, Jane Kaufman and Ron Chamelis. Thank you guys very much for being with us today. And I am joined here with the four candidates running to be the next Hampden County District Attorney. First to my left is Holyoke Attorney Shawn Allyn.
Good morning.
And to his left, we have Longmeadow Attorney Hal Etkin.
Good morning. Thank you for the invite.
Oh, certainly. And to his left, we have Hampden County Assistant DA Anthony-Gulluni of Springfield.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us, Anthony. And to his left, we have former prosecutor Brett Vottero, also of Springfield.
Good morning.
Gentlemen, thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate you making the time. We are here to field a couple of questions in this very important race, and we'll jump right into things. The first question, a lot of emphasis has been placed on who is the best and most experienced lawyer, particularly the prosecutor in this race. But the office of Hampden County District Attorney also requires a very strong and competent administrator. How would you handle this part of the job, and especially in regards to staffing, community outreach, and enforcing standards among your staff? And for this question, we will go right to the end. Brett, we can start with you.
Well, thanks. It's a great question because I've served as an administrator in the DA's office in many different capacities. I was chief of the murder unit, but I also volunteered at one point to be chief of the district court and chief of the juvenile court. And that was an opportunity to set the standards for what we expected of the staff and how they would operate. Outside of the DA's office, I just finished serving 3 years as president of an international children's organization. So I was responsible for managing that staff in Newcastle, England, and coordinating the work of volunteers all over the world. So I think you do have to have a combination of an awareness of the legal part of the job, but the ability to manage the staff in the office. So I've supervised many attorneys both inside that office and other work outside in the community.
Gotcha, thank you. Anthony,
Thank you, Rob.
How would you manage this aspect of the job?
Sure. I think I'm best positioned to take over those tasks. Right now, being in the office, I'm the only current assistant district attorney in the race, and I've worked under Bill Bennett, from whom I learned a lot. I worked under Mark Mastriani, who just left, and I was given a lot of responsibility and worked at all levels of the office. So to know sort of all corners of the office recently in the last 6 years in my time in the DA's office, I think is an important part of being able to run it and being able to know people's personalities, know what works best, what works in and out of the courtroom. So I feel best positioned being in the office. In my experience as a prosecutor and working in community outreach for the office, I think is an important piece of that as well.
Thank you very much. Hal, in regards to the managerial aspect of the job.
Managerial experience is probably the most important in terms of making the Hampden County District Attorney's Office the best in the state. As someone who ran the child abuse unit, where I supervise state troopers, private investigators, victim witness, and staff, I operate a mini DA's office within the DA's office. I also ran the police academy as the academy director, where we trained over 1,000 police officers in a year. I also ran a law office. The ability to hire, to supervise, to motivate, and in some cases discharge employees is a very important aspect of being the best district attorney.
Thank you very much. Shawn, topic of managing the folks in the office.
Well, I think one thing we have to remember is the office there's real people that work there, about 180 people, and I've worked with people my entire life for 20 years. Outside of just running my own law firm, which I consider to be very successful, you have to be able to relate with people and understand common problems, because even though there's lawyers working for you and support staff, people have problems, so you have to be able to know how to handle that. I'm probably the only guy in the field that has a very extensive employment law history and background. I've taken many employment law cases to trial. I'm well versed in employment law, but I'm ready to be a leader, and I relate well with people. I know how to collaborate with people. As a social worker for half a decade, that's all I did was work with outside agencies, diverse and multiple different types of employees. From a managerial point of view, though, I do think the office needs to reflect the diversity of the county that we live in.
Gotcha. So everybody has varying degrees of administrative experience. They all plan to apply those lessons if elected. All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. We'll go right to our next question. It's in regards to the situation down in Ferguson, Missouri. We recently ran a story posing the question of whether an incident like what happened in Ferguson could happen here in Hampden County. But truthfully, we've had multiple such incidents over the past few years when the minority community has reacted to what was perceived as police brutality. Taking a look at your role in the DA's office, how would you handle policing the police when these types of situations come to the surface and happen? And just for this, Shawn, we can start with you.
Obviously one of the incidences recently, the Melvin Jones case, I was the lead counsel on it, so I'm very familiar with how a community reacts and probably how a police department should act. But let me first start off by saying is Springfield is no Ferguson. We don't have that type of culture, but the system is a bit fragmented, and it needs to be repaired. One of the most important things we can do is empower the people in the minority community, in the black community, or whoever feels they're being affected by the type of abuse that you just outlined. And that means open communication, real communication. We have a civilian review board, and I can tell you it has no teeth, because the civilian review board can recommend something and then have it not be followed up on. So you can probably see how frustrating that can be for a citizen. It's very hard for a citizen to go in and file a complaint. They're very often they're scared, but you have to make it a comfortable process. You have to make them think that what they're doing matters, and they're going to respond. I know there was a whole debate on bringing the police commission back, but you got to let the citizens know there's an entity to have accountability. And having mentioned Melvin Jones, I'll tell you 99% of police officers are good, they're hardworking, but there is the 1% that crosses the line, and it is the responsibility of the district attorney to protect not only the person that's been abused by police brutality, if that's what it is, but members of the society from having that happen. But I can tell you, I've met with our police commissioner. He's very energetic. He doesn't agree with everything I have to say, and vice versa, but he has a different view, and he's very open-minded, and I think that's very positive in leading us to a different direction in dealing with these issues in Springfield.
Yes, thank you very much. Hal, this topic of policing the police.
I think 3 steps should be followed. That the matter should be fully investigated. We should make sure we know what the facts are. We should make sure that we do that in a way in which the information is accurately and completely collected. The second thing that the district attorney should do is establish trust with community leaders, so that community leaders know that what the district attorney is doing is the right thing. And third, I think that once you find out what happened based upon the evidence, you take the appropriate steps to hold people accountable.
Thank you very much. Anthony.
Thank you. I think the most important function of the DA's office in this kind of situation, and I have confidence that something like this wouldn't happen. I think we have fine officers here who are well-trained and level-headed. But I think as we've seen in the recent days in regard to the situation in Missouri, is that facts are coming out slowly to the public. And I think it's going to be important for a district attorney to remain, I think, impassive in the investigation he conducts into kind of these situations, because it's obviously resulted in a lot of anger and a lot of unrest in Ferguson, Missouri. So the district attorney is going to have to preside over that situation to make sure that a full investigation takes place and ultimately justice is done. I think in these kinds of situations where there's such emotion involved, the district attorney's partnerships with other agencies, members of the community, are going to be critical. And that's what I've talked about in our campaign, that partnerships and collaboration are going to be critical, not only in the effectiveness of the DA's office in terms of its prosecution, but also in its community outreach. And in situations like this, should they arise, that having those partnerships with members of the clergy, members in law enforcement, of course, and members of all agencies across the county and certainly the city of Springfield are going to be important to sort of quell the kind of unrest that Ferguson is experiencing in making sure that justice is done. I would also introduce the idea of an advisory board to the district attorney that would involve members of that community to have direct access to the district attorney on a regular basis, monthly or bi-monthly. You would have a group of community leaders who would interact directly with the district attorney to keep him, hopefully me, informed of the situations. And if something like this were to happen, you'd have those relationships and those direct lines of communication, which I think are critical to making sure justice is done and this kind of unrest doesn't happen here in Hampden County.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. Brett, topic of policing the police. How would you juggle this with working with them for a
Well, I think we need to take a proactive approach. We should not be waiting for the next incident of a shooting, a police-related shooting, to be prepared for it. And so I think what we need to establish are transparency, independence, and speed. I think those are the things that are missing in many of these cases. People need to feel that there is an independent review. And in order for that to take place, I think that before the next shooting, in other words, when I am in the process of becoming the district attorney, we need to start working out protocols on how we will handle police-related shootings, which agencies will be involved. You know, the district attorney by law is responsible, leads the investigation anytime there is a homicide. And I think we need to use that authority to assure the public that the investigation that's being done is independent. It also has to be done faster. I mean, we can sometimes, the police are very effective at Springfield, Holyoke, throughout the county at responding promptly to violent crime. And I think we can do the same thing when there's a police shooting. We can get the answers faster and get them out there faster. So I think if we combine transparency, so people see what's happening, with independence and speed, I think we can address some of the concerns that have people so upset while they're waiting for answers in a place like Ferguson.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much. And we're going to take a short break here, and we'll be back in a few moments with some more questions with the candidates.